Good morning. I was just taking the dog to the groomer this morning, and I had a thought while I was driving, and I wanted to share it with you. My sisters and I were on Zoom yesterday with my mom, and we've been doing this every other week just to keep company and to stay connected. For my mom, who's a very social person, the isolation has been a bit taxing, and she hasn't had her typical volunteer and social connections. And I'm the only one that lives out of state, and so it's a great way for me to stay connected with family too. I really enjoy those visits. But we were talking yesterday and actually laughing quite a bit because it struck us that we identified a couple of family traits because of the conversation that we were having about interacting with the world around us. And we don't procrastinate as a family. There's a job to be done, we get it done. There's a problem to be solved, we apply our resources and talk to each other or to others, and we move forward on the resolution. So there's not a lot of dilly-dallying in our lives. And you think often that the rest of the world is just like you, but not true. And challenges along those lines. I'm sure we drive other people crazy too, because everything is move forward. You know, there's a drive, there's a will, and there's a way. And it struck me while I was driving this morning that God has put me together that way. And yet I'm sure that God rolls God's eyes at me so often and chuckles and says, "Whoa, Monique, slow down here a bit. I didn't ask you to save the entire world." Already done that. Didn't ask you to carry this entire weight on your shoulders. It's about collaboration. And this tendency, my typical MO of ticking boxes and moving forward and, facing the next challenge and accomplishing the next dilemma or task, it struck me that if God is going to work in my life, that God will not be using my MO, my typical way of behaving, as a way to encourage change. Why? Because then how do I learn where the edge of my own drive, my own personal determination and drive ends and God's grace begins? So it struck me enough to pull the car to the side, right, and to talk to you a little bit about this, that when God is moving in our lives and inviting change and further reflection, because a lot of you have reached out to me and said, how do I know when God is doing that? It struck me this morning that actually it's a very glaring observation on our part. If we can recognize the invitation to behave and act in ways that are not our typical MO. So when God works with me, God will be encouraging quiet, solitude, deeper reflection, pondering, weighing options. So it's not, yes, here's the agenda and you go for it, Monique. It's, no, I want you to sit with this for a while. Check all of the ramifications, the domino effects. Be aware of what I'm calling you to and how that's going to be opposite so many times of what your typical response or reaction would be. That's where holiness comes from. That's where grace is employed in our lives. Virtue is about living in ways that are not our typical way of behaving. We're working with our nature, but against our nature. We are pushing ourselves to see a whole broad spectrum of options where our snap decision might be to behave in this particular way according to our personalities. So what a cool thing to think about. How important that is for us. And I encourage you to think about it today too. First of all, identify your typical MO. What's the way you usually problem solve or conquer dilemmas or face challenges in your life? And then pay attention to the invitations laid before you by others or by God for the opposite way. What's opposite to what your typical response would be? And could there be grace there? Could God be inviting a deeper weighing of truths and action in your life? Ways that will bring grace and growth. It's a long journey, but thank goodness we're not on it alone.